It's a vicious cycle. You feel bad about yourself, so you drink, which makes you feel bad about yourself, so you drink. Round and round you go with no idea how to stop. When you finally do quit drinking, that low self esteem sits there nagging at you until you take action. In this episode, we share what taking action looks like. Stay tuned for actionable, applicable steps that you can take right now to build your self esteem and support your sobriety.
Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery Podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and that recovery isn't just rewarding, but it's also a lot of fun. We're your hosts, Steve and Julie. Listen as we get together with friends to shed light on the hard things, talk about the other side of addiction, and how we create a life so full, there's no space left for alcohol.
One of the best ways to get even more out of this podcast is to journal about the things that you hear and find ways to apply them to your own life. You can get journal questions related to the episode delivered to your inbox each week by signing up for our weekly newsletter. Visit throughtheglassrecovery.com for more information. All right, welcome you guys. Thanks so much for being here today. Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery Podcast. This is episode 116, and we've got a couple of brand new guests for you guys. So super happy to be here. Really looking forward to the conversation. As usual, we're going to go with introductions, and I'm going to let Cassie get us started.
Well, thank you. Hi, y'all. I'm Cassie Bollinger. I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm 45. I'm a transplant Texan, so I've been here. I got here as fast as I could. Currently, I'm a full-time student. I'm working towards an IIT degree while I'm running my Cincy business. So I've been sober now since May 5th of 2021, which is 1,274 days, counting down day by day. And it's been a really rewarding journey because I've learned so much about myself. And then I also have a podcast called Whose Knows Best, kind of like knows. And it's just to share with Cincy consultants tips and stories. And I do talk about my recovery in there as well. So
Awesome.
today.
Really cool. Well, it's so nice to have you. And really looking forward to it. Make sure you include a link to your podcast when you send me your bio, and we'll put that in the notes for our listeners so they can make sure they check that out too. And then we've also got Brenton with us today. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Doing good.
Good, great. Well, I'm Brenton. Probably better known as Office Recovery, at least on Instagram. That's kind of my deal. I've been sober since July 24th of 22. So coming up on 2.5 years, or 828 days, I believe today, something like that. And so I started Office Recovery about a year after I got out of inpatient treatment. And my whole big impetus behind that thing is recognizing how humor heals and helps people move forward in their recovery journey. And so I love The Office. It's the greatest show on television of all time. I will fight you. And so I thought, why not use The Office to bring hopefully a little humor, help people smile, help them learn to laugh on their journey. And hopefully they can just kind of keep moving forward, take the next step. So that's kind of my deal. I'm also going to school. I'm getting my MBA. I graduate this spring. And so that'll be really exciting. And I've got some future ventures that'll be coming out as a result of that. So, yeah.
Well, isn't this interesting? There's 3 schoolgoers on this podcast because I just went back to school and I just started my business degree. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah, I'm in my first semester.
Okay. Just getting there. Well, you're in for a wild ride.
Yeah, I think with recovery, you kind of start looking at like, what else do I want to do with my time? And adding in that education seems to be a theme. It really does.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, I'm really, really happy to have you guys here and super excited to chat with you. So, for our topic, when people stop drinking and start becoming more and more aware of the emotions and beliefs that really fueled their drinking, low self-esteem comes up often as one of the key problems. A lot of folks start drinking in part to numb the feelings of low self-esteem, And then alcohol just makes them feel worse and worse about themselves. When they finally take alcohol out of the equation, finding ways to build self esteem and self worth becomes a very important part of the journey. So, what have you learned about building self esteem and sobriety? What has the process looked like for you? And what was it like when you were drinking? And how do you feel about yourself now? I know that's a lot of questions. I just wanted to give you guys some like ammo to get the thoughts rolling. So please feel free to take it in any direction that you want to go. But I think it's a really important topic.
I think while I was through, like, right after I quit, it was more or less as I had to do that gut check of why was I even drinking? Because that's kind of one of your first questions is like, why did I do this to myself? When you start to feel better, you have those first couple of days of just like the white knuckling through. But when I started to realize why I was drinking, then it was more or less as it kind of correlated with why my self esteem was so low and why I started drinking to begin with. And I'm a trauma survivor, so I really drank myself to numb, and that's where I was at in life, and I spent so much time, and afterwards, when I had to figure out where to focus, like, how do I put my energy into something else, and I realized that I didn't think I was good enough to do anything else, and that's why it was easy to go drink, and I really just started doing the self-help books, like, I know it's kinda cliche, but it really, there was a couple of books that really hit home and realized that I need to start feeling worthy of the space I'm in, worthy of everything. And I had heard on one of the podcasts I was listening to that God makes us perfect in His image. And when you look at it that way, it's like, yes, we have flaws, but I'm perfectly made, so there's nothing wrong with me. And if someone tells you that something's wrong with you, then it's because that's their opinion. It's not. It doesn't mean that you are not worthy of time or anything, and so I really had to dive deep and realize that I have so much to give and so much potential that there's no reason for me to sit here and numb everything that I need to feel it. I need to get through it, and the self-esteem started coming from that, of realizing how worthy I am and how I can stand up tall and strong and walk through anything and not have to worry about what anybody else thinks because it's not their journey, it's mine. It's mine, I claim it. It's ever growing and it's ever evolving, my husband likes to say I throw too much stuff on my plate, but you know what? I like to do a juggling act and see if anything starts to fall.
That just mean you're hungry?
That always hungry. I mean, ever since I quit drinking, I'm a foodie. Like I love food. Oh my goodness. So yeah.
So let me ask you really quick, because I feel like our listeners are going to want to know this. What self-help books did you read that were really helpful to you? Because there's so many good books out there, both for quit lit and just for self-improvement. So if you were to name a couple books, what would they be?
I was going to ask that question too.
Worthy by oh my gosh, I'm going blank. Jamie Kern Lima. I
Uh-huh.
think that's her. Yeah,
Okay.
Worthy. So Worthy was like the first book, and I bought it for myself and I bought it for my husband. And then I was driving and going back to school, so I got onto the audiobook. And so I technically didn't read it. That one I listened to, but I had the hard copy and I actually gave it to one of my best friends because I was like, "You need to read this book." And then the other one was Jenny Potter, Self-Sabotage No More. It just made me realize that, not only is it worthy, but there was the reason why things were happening to me was it was happening to me. No, yeah, it was happening for me, not to me. And
Mhm.
it's like, and I was self-sabotaging myself, and that's why it was so easy to drink. "Oh, I had a bad day. Let me go grab a beer." Like, "Oh my gosh, I got a promotion. Let's go grab a drink." Like, "Oh, shots are on me." It was the self-sabotaging because I felt like no matter how good it was, there was always a reason to go drink. And so now it's like, well, if it's good, what do I do? And then it's like, I can't be that good because I used to celebrate that way. So it's like retraining my brain to realize that not only am I worth it, but I'm a lot of my problems sometimes. Like, I got to get myself out of the way just so that I can accomplish something. And that's where the self doubt and all that stuff comes in. So those two books were really, really great for me.
Awesome. I actually listened to an interview with Jamie Lima that wrote Worthy. She was on the Mel Robbins podcast. And I haven't read the book, but just the stuff she talked about in that interview was super powerful. So it's on my list. I probably need to move it a little bit higher on the list. But yeah, great suggestions, and thank you so much for bringing those up.
Yeah, it's kind of a tearjerker at some points because, there's a part in there that she talks about losing her mom, and so it's for some it will hit closer.
Mm-hmm.
So
You said
As-
something really important there. Sorry, Steve. Give me.
no, go for it.
You said something really important there too, where like if people tell you you're not worthy, you don't have to, like, their opinion doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
And I think what I realized is like nobody walked up to me and was like, "You suck and you're not worthy of anything good," right? That didn't. I mean, other than when I was bullied in high school, like I didn't get a lot of just straightforward words like that from people, but over the course of my whole life, I've gotten those little messages. They pop up almost like insidiously and a lot of times not even intentionally, where my parents would say things or my husband would say things or a friend would say things that they, even if it wasn't intended that way, would give me the message that you aren't good enough. You're not valued. You need to try harder. You need to hustle more to have worth and value. And so I absorbed that message from so many different places in my life that I felt terrible about myself. So I couldn't pinpoint like, yeah, somebody said this thing and it made me feel bad about myself. Like looking back now that I've kind of picked apart all of the stuff, because that's kind of what you have to do. I realized it was just this messaging that I'd gotten for so many years that made me feel bad. And I was like, that's when you have to step back and be like, okay, I don't have to believe this messaging anymore. I can choose to stop and I can choose to rewrite my beliefs and all of that. The self-sabotaging stuff, I think, is a part of that. But yeah, I think we just adopt this belief system about ourselves a little by little, growing up all the way into adulthood and beyond, that makes us feel like we're not good enough for the things
Well,
that we want.
and you also need to look at who it's coming from. Like, why are they telling you this? Because I had an ex who told me that I was never going to amount to anything and I'd never find anyone better than him. And it's funny to look back, and I took so much stock into that you're right. But then I look back now and see where I'm at and see, where his life has taken him. That was just a way to keep me down, to keep me under his thumb. And that's where a lot of my, I guess, my trauma continued was just through somebody who is supposed to love me telling me that I'm not worthy of anything. That that like you're never gonna find anything better. I had a job. I worked 2 jobs and went to school full time supporting him and on my daughter. So like
Oh,
tell me, so it's looking back now and like, why did I let myself get into that? But I was young and, you look for acceptance when you're younger. And I think that's where my alcoholism came in, was because I was so young and that was the thing you did. When you turn 21, what do? You go celebrate at the bar, you start bar hopping. I mean, that was what I thought that life was just supposed to be about.
yeah.
And looking back now, I don't even, it's by God's grace that I'm here. It really is. It truly is.
I'm
All
really
right.
glad you're here.
Mm-hmm. It's time to give Brenton the floor.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Self-esteem, right? That was the original. Yeah. Apply. Okay. No, I absolutely resonated with what you said earlier, because yeah, so much of my drinking flowed from really an identity of failure, and much like what you were saying, there there were so many messages and so many narratives that were internalized by myself, that when I held it up against what I was doing, right, what I was accomplishing or a lack thereof, it just amounted to this overwhelming sense of failure. And I've done the work to recognize some of those patterns that have cropped up in the past, of those really innocuous statements that are made that nobody bats an eye at, but for some reason you, as like a 6-year-old, 5-year-old boy, just like internalize this message. And you think, the example that I'm comfortable sharing this. I grew up in the ministry. My dad was a pastor, is a pastor, And all my family are very heavily involved in ministry. And at some point when I was a little boy, I was reciting verses, I think in Sunday school or something like that. And I don't remember who said it, and that's probably a good thing. But somebody said something like, "Well, there's our little Billy Graham," referring to me. And if you're familiar with who Billy Graham is, he's a very well renowned evangelist who's passed on. Well, anyway, for some reason, that phrase that I overheard, I don't think it was even stated to me, sunk so deep that kind of from that point forward, everything that I did felt like it had to be at this Billy Graham level. And that extrapolated to everything I did. I got really into sports, thought I had to be Michael Jordan, wasn't Michael Jordan. Um, the opposite. I'm like 5'7", and yeah, and can't jump and no, in high school, I could jump, but not so much anymore. But I had to work at that very, very hard. But so there was this whole pattern, right, of everything that I would get into, and I tried so many different things because I kept feeling like there was this expectation that I had to live up to, and certainly nobody else. I mean, I guarantee you, anyone else in my circle, if you would have asked them of expectations of me, wouldn't have said anything close to that. But because that's what I chose to believe, the narrative about myself, everything had to be at this top tier level, and it wasn't. And so my drinking really kicked off. I had stepped away. I actually became a pastor myself, and I had pastored a church north of Seattle for a couple of years. And I voluntarily left that position due to some things going on there and just the health of my family and things like that. It just wasn't a good fit. Well, stepping away from that, what I didn't realize was that not only was another venture that I had pursued and that I dreamed about and that I was passionate about, that I had stepped away from, but I saw that as failure. I saw it, I didn't step into this position and become a success. I also didn't step into this position and just grit it out and kind of have this like faithful, loyal presence because, I made the choice and the right choice for my family to get out of that. But still internally, there was this huge thing of failure. And so the self-esteem side of things was a big part of it for my drinking because like you, I drank to numb. I drank to escape. I didn't want to start facing the questions that all of a sudden were really popping up on, who are you? And questions of worth and self-esteem, confidence, who am I? All those identity type, questions just flooded to the surface when I stepped away from this position. And because now I've got a string of, probably half a dozen different attempts at being great and never was, according to the standard that I had set for myself. And so the one thing I found that I could do really well was escape. And so I did that. And I did that very heavily and very drastically for about 2 years to the point where it got to a point where I was having a lot of medical issues. I was going into the ER multiple times and a bunch of stuff was going on and ended up checking myself into rehab because I knew I couldn't stop. And it was just a fast downward spiral. But yeah, that's how self-esteem really played into my drinking as well, was just try to escape that sense of failure.
I love how you explain that and express that. It's a really eloquent way of expressing how the identity of failure really affected you. Like when you said the identity of failure, for me, I was like, oh, not enough, because that's where I went. As soon as I was like, I was listening to you was not enough. So I would do, but I wouldn't do enough because it never felt like it was going to be enough. So I was the guy that gave up before. I was the guy that would try, and I would try really hard, and I would just give up on all of the things.
Yeah.
Because it never met someone else's expectation, not my own, but it never met somebody else's.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting while I was listening to you, I was thinking, what's the difference between self-worth and self-esteem? And the thought that came across my mind was self-worth is something that I can give away to other people. I can give that to someone else and it it fell flat a lot. Where self-esteem is something that's an internalized thing for me, right? I don't think you can give your self-esteem away, but you can definitely give your self-worth away. And I had never separated those two until I listened to you, and I was like, wait, hold on one second. I can give my value as a person to someone else and hope that gets reflected back to me the way I expect it to, which is something I'm definitely guilty of. That doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, but I guarantee you that contributed to my drinking. But self-esteem is something that I build within me by completing tasks, by having hard conversations, by being honest, by taking care of myself. Like, that's the difference between self-worth, I think, and self-esteem, right? Is that whole internalized piece, that identity that you talk about. What do I identify with? What is my belief system, and what part matches and what doesn't match anymore?
Right.
And I'm
Yeah. And
bring, yeah, go ahead.
sorry. Yeah. And it makes me think of the whole idea of like, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and so if you're even intentionally trying to do good by providing self-worth to other people, right. And I guess I would connect with that because especially as a former pastor, but someone who just deeply loves people, there was a constant pouring out and in this hopeful kind of serving and loving for people, but very much lacking the self-esteem, the proper perception, right, of who I am and my value and my worth. And that can come from a whole host of different things. But yeah, I think you quickly find out, or at least I did, when the veneer of confidence and the veneer of self-esteem gets too thin, there's nothing else that's pouring out. And so then you got to do the hard work. And then I think the beauty is once you do that hard work, that hard, kind of self-examination, and take a good look in the mirror uh, and figure out who you are, then you can start pouring back out again. And you're no longer dependent, right, on that return self-worth either. You can just give, they can take it, they can leave it, and you're still standing strong because you know who you are and the value that you carry into the conversation, how you show up.
So one of the things that was an interesting lesson for me to learn was, and this ties into my self-worth and self-esteem, when I'm having a conversation with somebody and somebody says something about me that I know is false, but it still hurts, that means it's something I believe, right? So, like, if you turned around and you said, Steve, you're a black guy, I'd laugh at you. I'm not at all a black guy, right? But if you said, Steve, you're an idiot, right? That might cause me to pause a little bit more, especially if that's something I believe. That would hurt my feelings if I believed that I was an idiot. But if I don't believe that I am an idiot, you can call me whatever you want. It's not gonna sting that way. Not the way it used to, because I used to take things really personally. And when I did that, it affected my self-esteem. It was because I was giving my self-worth away. I'm doing this math here as I talk. And it's like the emotional math of the whole thing, right? It's like, where do I give it and where does it come back? And then where is it an internalized thing? And this is where it comes to like the belief. I know that I'm not a black man. I also know that I'm not an idiot, right? So you can call me an idiot now and it's not going to hurt like it did 2 years ago.
Well, and you also have to look with, you're talking about internal and external. Like, yeah, it's hard to deal with the external, but then what happens is it creeps into your internal. And whenever your constant mindset is that I'm so stupid, I can't do this. Why am I even trying this? That little voice in your head, that is like our minds believe what we believe. Like in our mind. So if I say that the sky is always purple every single day, I'm going to believe that no matter what, because I'm telling myself that every day. So whenever you have that internal voice that sits there and, tells you, I don't know why you even spoke up. Why did you even talk? Why did you do this? Like, they're going to think you're stupid. And then you believe it. Your subconscious starts to believe it. And that's where, your self-esteem builds and goes down from there. So if you change the way you talk, if you change the way that your internal dialogue with yourself, it will build up your self-esteem. I mean, I used to wake up every morning and say, I am strong, I am powerful, I'm worthy, and I'm going to conquer today. That was like the first thing that would roll through my head every morning. And it took me months to believe it, but it takes time. And it's kind of like with the whole like drinking. I would say I'm not drinking today. It's like I don't want to drink. There's no reason to drink. I'm good. I can stay home. Let's get busy. What are we doing today so we're not drinking? And it was a constant every day. And those daily affirmations for me worked. I mean, I even had Post-it notes. I had stuff that popped up on my phone. I would send automated text messages scheduled to come to me like throughout the day. So it felt like what was sending to me.
There's something to be said about bombarding yourself with a whole bunch of external love until you believe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, seriously, I can relate to that one. Not in the same way, but I mean, if you bombard yourself, it's like if you continue to eat junk food, you're gonna get the results of continuing to eat junk food. Like your body's gonna look like what you eat. And if you continue to feed your mind good, healthy things, eventually your mind is gonna start becoming better and healthier because you're feeding yourself that as opposed to constantly chewing on junk.
It
And
takes so much to even like want to say the nice things to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember like I had just a loop of negativity that would flow through my head. It was constant sometimes. Um, and I would notice it. I'd be like, okay, I'm doing the negativity thing, right? Like, I mean, I would call myself stupid, worthless, failure over and over again. It was horrible, the things that I said to myself. And I could even notice it and be like, okay, me saying these things is only hurting me more. But I still didn't have, like back when I was still drinking and whatever, I still didn't have enough of a desire to even change that. I could catch it. And I think that like that's how we refute the self-talk, right? We catch it first and we're like, okay, these are negative self thoughts and then this is negative self-talk. How can I turn this into something positive? And I remember like I didn't even want to turn it into anything positive. I didn't even think I deserved to hear anything positive from myself. Like my self-esteem and self-worth was so low that I didn't even want to say the nice things to myself. And I think getting sober and proving to myself that I could do that was probably the first step. And then making tiny incremental changes that I knew were positive kind of helped build the self-esteem. So at least there was enough of like a smidgen of self-esteem there that I could say, no, like I really do deserve to think nicer things about myself. But there was a battle there for years where I didn't even think I deserved to say the nice things to myself. It was a struggle for a long time, getting stuck like that low.
Well, and I've told my friends, I'm like, because, I have a lot of friends that have kids, and I'm like, that little voice that you tell yourself, like all these things about how bad, if a stranger walked into your house and started telling those things to your children,
Yeah.
what would you say? Like, would you allow that? Because, we're very protective over other people, but we never seem to be protective over ourselves. Like, we never worry about ourselves first because then that makes you know, that means you're being selfish and you can't be selfish. You got to be, selfless all the time. And I had to start being selfish. I now have like a regiment for, going to bed. Wash my face. I get myself ready. I get into bed and I have a routine because I never did that. It was flopping on the bed because I was already drunk. And it's like, I just got to, where's my crackers, water, and, ibuprofen just to get through the night because I knew it was going to be horrible the next day. And so I was already prepping, but I never took care of myself. It wasn't until recovery that I started even worrying about anything about me. It was always for somebody else. It was always, let me take care of everybody in my family. It's kind of like what Brenton said about you trying to give away from an empty cup. You don't have anything left to give. And so you just kind of give up and like, oh, well, I'll figure it out tomorrow.
Mhm.
I'm looking at Britton to see. Yeah, go for it.
No, I'm just thinking it's there's so much goodness in all of this. And I think that moving into realms where you can start to kind of begin that self-esteem journey again. Um, I think you hit it right on the head when you talked about just finding those small incremental things that you can do to kind of build that. And much like you, for me, coming out of the rehab facility and inpatient treatment, um, no, even before that, let me back up. I think the first point that I noticed in my journey, my value, was actually in rehab, and we're sitting in a circle with a bunch of other guys and gals that are all there for various reasons. We're all there in lockdown kind of situation, and we sat in a circle and we're just going through our stories, right? Telling our stories, and there's just absolute heartbreak, there's tears, there's, just these recounting of just some really, really sad stuff and just really sad stories. And I looked around the room and I've written a little bit on this, but I looked around the room and I caught some of their gazes, their eyes. And as we looked into each other's eyes, there was something there that not only did I feel this incredible connection with them, just sharing this experience with them, but what was really astounding was that for the very possibly for the very first time, found out that I was valuable because I was there. Not because of anything I said, not because I looked at them in the eye, but like my presence, just being there as someone is sharing their story in this safe space because we're all jacked up in this room. And my presence of being there, I was like, it just struck me that there's value in that there's something about us being able to just be there for somebody. And that's kind of what started the journey for me of recognizing my value in just me being who I am, not because of anything I've accomplished, not because of anything I've put together, not because of, my bank account, my size of my house, my car, any of that kind of stuff. It's simply, it was found in the fact that it's a soul and a human body trying to live life as best as they possibly can with other humans trying to do the exact same thing, and we're just side by side on this journey. And and to be able to walk hand in hand with these folks through that whole period, that's kind of where it started for me. And then so coming out of all of that treatment, I just carried that with me, and that's hopefully, I trust that that's what I'm going to continue to carry with me through the rest of my life, is that so much of our value comes from, yes, the stuff we say to ourselves, yes, the positive talk and all of those things are helpful. So much of our value comes from the fact that we are who we are and we're here for a purpose and for a time and for a place and a season. And a lot of times, the people that are around us, we're here for them, whether we realize it or not. And they probably don't realize it. But your value is that you're like you mentioned, creating the image of God. I mean, your value is that you're imago Dei, and you're a person with other people on a planet, and they need you just like you need them. And that's kind of where I started kind of feeling that value again, and recognizing the value that I had in just being present with people. And then following that was, I did, read a lot of books, started exercising, doing small accomplishment things. Used to be an athlete, was very much not an athlete for a while, and getting back into it. And just, little things like all of a sudden, like, oh, whoa, I did 50 push-ups without stopping, and like just random, but like little victories like that stack, right? On top of each other. And you slowly begin to get confidence again. And being able to show up the way that you want to show up with people and not be worried. Like I was a perfectionist in that I cared so much about people's perception of me. And so I would show up differently to different scenarios because I felt like this is what they expected, or what I should, I thought this is what I should look like in this scene. and being able to be comfortable with just showing up as me and not have to be the guy to crack the funny joke, not have to be the guy that does something extremely wise or spiritual or whatever the situation is. But I can just show up and just be me. And the surprising thing is I've found most people actually resonate with that a lot better, right? Because you're authentic, I guess, if you want to use that buzzword.
Authenticity is magnetic.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really is.
Yeah. And so that's like my kind of the next steps in all of that I've taken, and the doing I'm really, really a big proponent of folks, especially folks in recovery, but I think folks in general, just having momentum. Momentum is like this huge word in my life of like finding something to do. Like for me, it's like, going back to school, it's getting back into writing. I wrote a kid's book that I'm working on getting published. Like there's a handful of things, starting office recovery, like all these things I never would have actually done. I would have thought about doing, but never actually did. Like you start these things and there's always momentum, always something to be working on, always something to be moving towards, cold plunging. I got a cold plunge. I'm that guy now. Like I do that, like just things like that, but it's something new. It's something different. It's something hard and I'm doing it. And every time I do something like that and I engage in that, it builds confidence in who I am, and kind of you get this solidity to your core.
I think challenging is like to challenge yourself. It is kind of those when you start getting that getting through recovery and you're trying to change your life, is that we have to do the hard things, and it's the challenging. And that's kind of where why I went back to school. I never thought about, doing the videos I do for trainings for my business. Like I never thought that would be me. And because I was always drunk. So, I always look hungover. Well, now I don't have to worry about it. Like I can sit there and do it and go through the whole video and are doing anything like this on this platform. If you had told me that, 4 years ago that this is where I was going to be, I would never have believed you, because this would be like, why? No one's going to listen to me. Like no one cares what I have to say. This is not where you're going to be. But it was a challenge, and it's stepping outside of yourself or what you normally do. It's like you have to change the whole script. It's basically starting all over and like, where do I want to go? What do I want to do? And what do I want to accomplish? And let's start checking off the list.
I think that, yeah, there's so much of that resonates with me. When I read somewhere, it was probably like on a reel or something. This feels very Instagrammy, but self-worth comes from keeping promises to yourself. And that one stuck with me, because if there was one thing I was good at when I was drinking, it was not keeping any promises to myself. I would bend over backwards to keep a promise to anyone else. Anybody, it didn't matter who they were. But for me, I always let it go. Whatever it was that I said I was going to do for myself, I wouldn't follow through. I would be too tired, or it wouldn't be that important, or it wasn't that big of a deal. And it was never important enough to keep promises to me. And so like you guys are both talking about challenging yourself. I have this weird love for like 30-day challenges where I just commit to doing something for 30 days. And Steve and I did this paleo diet for 30 days in September, right? It was like 100% committed. We weren't going to eat any sugar, any grains, any legumes, any whatever. Like it was brutal, right? And because there were two of us and we could hold each other accountable, we did it. And I made it through some tough stuff. Like I had a wedding and I had vacations and I was traveling and I had to really work for it. But at the end of that, like I felt so good about myself. I felt good physically because, I was eating really great food for me, but I felt really good mentally too. And it made me feel better about myself. And we've actually stuck with the paleo thing because we felt so good. But, then it's turned into, I'm going to exercise every day and commit to that. And then the self-esteem goes up just a little bit more, and just building all those things in, and telling myself I'm going to commit to this thing, and then actually following through with it, whatever it is. You could commit to meditating for 5 minutes a day for a month. And by the end of that month, if you've actually stuck with it, you're going to feel better about yourself. Like that's just how that stuff works. It's making the promise and then sticking with it, even when it's hard and even when you don't want to, and even when it doesn't feel good. That when you get through that, your self-esteem just starts building. It's like little building blocks, one after the other, that start building it up.
The one thing I found too when I do that is The excuse that I don't have the time is a crock of shit. It's an absolute crock of shit. I have the time. We all have the time to spend 15 minutes a day on ourselves, right? It's there. It exists. And one of the ways that I had to find that is sometimes I had to say no to things because I had to stick to whatever that was. Last year, I did a run challenge, run a mile a day, and then I had my kids, and I was like, how am I going to run a mile a day with the kids? Well, I had to ask for help. I had to say, hey, this is my commitment. Can you help me? And so every little bit and all of those little things, like that is the work that I had to do to maintain the promise that I was giving to myself to keep. And I feel like this is probably about the time to wrap this one up too. You all touched on some really awesome things. One of the things that was in common that you talked about was your identity and your beliefs of yourself. And you all talked about how that changed and how back to the promises that we have for ourselves and what we do to keep them. It's an emotional game. Everyone talked about how it was an emotional experience for all of us. You talked about changing your self-talk, talked about some books, and you shared some really awesome, valuable experience. But Brenton, you said something that really, really stuck, and I loved it, was we're all just a soul in a human body sharing an experience with someone. And I know I shortened that up, but I thought that was a really beautiful way to sum that up.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
finding ourselves lets us share that soul with other people in that really authentic way that you mentioned. So I want to say thank you, Cassie, and thank you, Brenton, for sharing your thoughts and experiences with us here today, because I think this is a great episode and very, very valuable. So appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe or follow Through the Glass Recovery podcast so you never miss future episodes, which come out every Monday.